Nowadays, we think of philosophy as an academic subject, taught at universities, and to be a philosopher is to be a professor. Yet, that is not how it has always been. Pierre Hadot, French philosopher and historian of ancient philosophy, tells us. In ancient philosophy of the Greek and Roman times, it was possible to be a philosopher and write nothing. For what mattered was not philosophical discourses, but living philosophy. Living philosophy was a spiritual exercise and not merely a moral or intellectual activity. This spiritual exercise was separated into 4 distinct disciplines that Hadot labels learning to live, learning to dialogue, learning to die, and finally learning to read. Let us describe each of these 4 disciplines in a little more detail. The aim of philosophy is to teach you to know how to live better. What prevents you from doing so? The answer of the ancient philosophers is your emotions. We cannot control what happens to us, but we can manage our own emotions. The Stoics, for example, one of the most famous of the ancient schools of philosophy, argued that 2 of the common origins of human unhappiness were attachment to possessions and the avoidance of inevitable misfortune. What philosophy teaches us is that the only thing that has any true value is ourselves. I cannot control what happens to me, but I can shape my attitude to events. One of the Stoics' favorite sayings is, indifference to indifferent things. You are unhappy because you worry and fear about things that might happen to you, rather than being concerned about yourself and your attitude. One of the important exercises of the Stoics was attention, prosoche. It is only through careful attention to myself that I can learn how to master my emotions. Part of this kind of attention is living in the present, because it is by dwelling in the past and fearing the future that causes my mental distress. The spiritual exercise of philosophy is never just a solitary affair. It is only through true dialogue with others that you can truly gain self-knowledge, and such authentic speech is rare. This is why the ancient philosophers believed that you could only do philosophy with your friends, since who else would you speak the truth to? Such a truth-telling was not about speaking about true things, but speaking the truth to someone. It concerns speaking as self-transformation and not just learning to speak knowledgeably. To learn to die is not to be morbidly obsessed about death. It is to realize what is most important about your life. Socrates, the philosopher of the most importance to all the ancient philosophers, did not fear death because he knew that what was most valuable to him would survive: the truth. It is only by you and I facing our own death that we can come to understand what is the most important part of our lives. It is not, as the Stoics said, our possessions, our wealth, our money, and so on, for all these will disappear in our death. The only thing that is truly valuable is our self-worth. To read was not to learn about philosophy so as to be knowledgeable, but to gain mastery of oneself. This is why ancient philosophy can appear to us, as Hadot explains, as unsystematic. They did not write to solely communicate ideas, but to meditate on their own actions and thoughts. We should not read, for example, Marcus Aurelius's, a Stoic philosopher and Roman emperor, Meditations as a discourse on his philosophy, but, as the title suggests, a meditation on the self. What happened in our history that we now consider philosophy so differently? Hadot suggests that the rise of Christianity meant that it was no longer philosophy that was seen as a guide to living, but theology. In the medieval university, philosophy was merely seen as a tool or technique. Today, however, with the rise of secularism, philosophy can return to its roots as a way of life, and not just as a discourse whose place is only in the university.